Hello there! Right, you're here with Scott Marsh, the Mind Body Mentor, and today I actually want to talk about something a little bit different. I don't normally talk about things that come up in the press, but a couple of weeks ago there was an article, and it was basically about super slimmers who had lost a hell of a lot of weight. We're talking like 10 stone, 11 stone, big weight losses, and how a couple of years later they'd put it back on. Now, the stats that they basically were quoting was that if you are someone who has lost about 10 to 20 stone, you've got about 40% chance of putting it back on if you were using an extreme diet. But to be honest with you, from working with people for so long, is that most people, when they've actually put in the hard work, lost a lot of weight, are going to put it back on within about 3 years. I would say that there's probably about a 90% chance of that happening. And it happens for a lot of different reasons. Now, obviously, I'm one of the few people who has actually lost a hell of a lot of weight. Obviously, I used to be 17.5 stone, and now I've managed to drop it down to a nice 11 stone, and I've stayed there for about the past 10 years. So I figured I've got something to talk about on this subject at least. And the reason why I thought it might be something interesting to talk about today was because I was getting a lot of clients asking me about this, because I think press articles like this paint a very bleak picture of weight loss. I mean, if you're going to put it all back on again, you have to put in all the hard work, all the hard graft. What's the point? It's completely demotivational in order to get where you want to be. So let's just talk about a couple of reasons what happens when you're actually losing weight. I don't think this is something that's covered a lot. I've basically got two kind of emotional reasons or mindset reasons, and I've got a final one which is of course going to be a more biological approach, more kind of nutritional based in how the body works. So the first thing that I want to talk about is actually when you go on a weight loss mission, is that you have an adjustment of priorities. Now, the quote always goes that either you're going to be working towards pleasure or you're going to be pushing away from pain or working away from pain. Now, we all know from a motivational perspective that unfortunately pain tends to be a little bit more motivating than pleasure. So if you want to lose a bit of weight because you just fancy doing it, you've probably got less of a chance of achieving it than someone who has been bullied or is going through a horrible divorce and is really kind of in some sort of level of emotional trauma at the moment. The person who is going through more emotional trauma is more likely to get the result. So if we're talking about this continuum between pain and pleasure, then the thing we have to remember with weight loss is that when you first start off on a weight loss mission, is that you're probably going to be experiencing a fair level of pain. So if you're experiencing a fair level of pain, of course you're going to be able to grit your teeth a little bit more, push through a little bit more, and actually get where you want to be. You've got that driving force behind you. But of course, as you start losing the weight, as you start seeing the scale come down, as you start feeling your clothes getting looser, all of those sorts of things, is that level of pain you were in before actually starts reducing. So of course, when you actually reach your weight loss goal, is that pain's not really there anymore. You haven't got a driver behind it to keep it off. And because if you've been on a particularly long weight loss journey, you've forgotten what it actually felt like to be in the pain that you were when you first started. So the first reason why I think a lot of people put it back on is because of this whole balance between pain and pleasure, is that we simply forget, or that the pain is just not as strong as when we first started. So that's one of the main reasons. But also I want you just to think about people normally. I mean, the sort of clients that I tend to work with, they're spinning a hell of a lot of plates, whether it's the kids, whether it's schools, whether it's work, whether it's their careers, whether it's their relationships. They're spinning a hell of a lot of plates. They're trying to do a lot of things at once. And I think the thing that people often forget, and I think people try and make this sound really happy, but when you're actually working towards something, you can try and be as in balance as you want to. But one area is always going to suffer. If you need to put your energy, your commitment, and all of your excitement and all these sorts of things in one basket, you're going to be taking it away from other baskets too. So a lot of people who go through weight loss journeys and actually succeed is that they've been through times where everything else in their life has normally gone downwards whilst they've been in their pursuit of weight loss, because they needed the capacity, they needed the energy to actually just put into that goal and actually get the weight off. But of course, we can't live like that. Some people do, and it actually sends them to a really bad place, which is obviously the dark side of fat loss, because they've put so much effort and all their time and all their energy into themselves and their weight loss that they've gradually started forgetting their friends, they've gradually started forgetting their family, and all these sorts of stuff. So obviously, people get to a stage when they've actually lost all the weight and they've put all that energy in. They need to rebalance their lives again. And this becomes really difficult because as soon as they take that energy, time, and commitment away from them and their figure and all those sorts of things, is that to put on their family and all that sort of stuff, is that what they tend to find is that they don't feel the same as they did when they're losing the weight, and actually they find it a lot more comfortable because of course the pain's not there anymore, and they put it back on. Now, the other thing, and this is something that I went through when I lost all of my weight, is that once you've lost a hell of a lot of weight, is that you almost go through a identity crisis. Because for someone who's held weight for many, many, many years, you've developed the front. You've developed the mask, you've developed your shield, you've developed whatever. Whether you're using humour to cover up how you're feeling about yourself, whether you've got all of your comebacks to all the insults that you might get, is that you've got this kind of protective mechanism over. Now, the thing that everybody tends to notice when they lose a lot of weight is they start getting comments. Okay? People start noticing that they've lost weight. They start getting recognised. They start getting attention. That's bloody scary. But for people who have actually been on a weight loss journey, who have been fat all their lives or have been holding fat for a long period of time, they're not used to this. This is a weird way of reacting. They don't need to hide behind humour. They don't need to hide behind a shield anymore. So it's bloody scary. And I think this is the thing that people don't recognise, is that it is okay to be scared because you are a completely different person. Yes, you're the same person inside as you probably always were, but you haven't got to put up that front anymore. You haven't got to put up that protective mechanism anymore, because you don't need protecting. But of course, it starts raising questions to you of, who am I? What am I about? What do I need to do with myself? All these sorts of things. It is a complete identity crisis. And this can be so scary for people because whereas before they could hide behind a story, I'm overweight, that's my story, is they can't hide behind it anymore. And that bit's really, really scary for a lot of people. So what do people do? Is they get down to that weight, they don't know how to deal with this new person that they've created themselves, so they put the weight back on. They go back to safety again. And I think this is something that really a lot of people actually get stuck with. And they don't know how to deal with it, they don't know how to handle it, they don't have the tools and techniques to rebuild themselves, to create their own new stories, because they're in the wrong part of the brain to actually create their own new stories, create their own new adventures, and enjoy the body that they've created. But of course, there are two kind of emotional reasons why I think people tend to put on weight once they've lost a fair bit. But when we come more to the biological or the nutritional reasons behind it, and I think this was actually covered in the article about the super slimmers, as it were, I think it was actually a TV series as well, is that what we have to remember is that whether we're using extreme dieting approaches or not, is that you're going to have to put yourself in some sort of calorie deficit, which means that basically you're going to be burning more calories per day than you're actually taking into your body. Obviously, with the more extreme diets, so the powder sort of diets and shakes and all that sort of stuff, is that they can bring your calorie levels down extremely low. And what happens when you bring your calories down extremely low is that your body has to compensate in some way. So it starts slowing down its functions. And when it slows down its functions, your body doesn't quite act as it used to. It's almost in like a stage of protection because it doesn't know when that next meal is going to come in. It doesn't know when you're going to feed it again. So it doesn't know how to react. So it just goes into storage mode. Now, there's different levels of how the metabolism actually reacts. You can class some of it as, first of all, metabolic compensation. You'd see metabolic compensation, you'll probably recognise some of the symptoms of this. This is when basically things slow down, when you might hit a plateau, when you need to make another change to get things moving again. You might find the energy's a little bit low. Metabolic compensation is pretty common. You're going to find that when you're on a dieting journey is that most people will hit metabolic compensation at some point. But what they're not all people are going to hit is metabolic resistance. And this is when things start getting a little bit more serious. It starts when you basically really struggle to get the weight off, or you might even start gaining a little bit of weight, even though you haven't changed anything, or you haven't dropped any activity, or anything like that. Now, metabolic resistance gets more common if you've been on some of the more extreme diets, and it becomes very, very difficult if you want to go back to a normal way of eating, to go back to it without actually putting anything on. And then, of course, it then goes down a little bit further into what we call metabolic damage, and this is where you really start realising how much your nutrition actually affects the rest of your body and your hormonal system and everything, because you can have things like low thyroid turning up, your metabolism slows down, you're cold all the time, you can't sleep very well, your moods change, you're depressed, you're anxious, you're all of these sorts of factors. And this is really common with a lot of these low-calorie approaches to dieting. And it's something that people aren't really warned about that much. People go into them because they want to lose a little bit of weight, but what they don't realise is that over time, especially if they stay on these diets for a long period of time, is that they're actually reducing their ability to lose weight in the future and almost encouraging weight gain to come on, as well as actually experiencing a lot of negative emotional effects too. So just something to consider is that if you're someone who is looking to lose weight, Well, first of all, just be ready for it because it's going to be an emotional roller coaster, but it's also going to be a biological roller coaster too. And if you're someone who's just lost a lot of weight, and perhaps you're struggling a little bit with the whole identity crisis thing, or perhaps you're struggling to lose that last little bit because your pain and pleasure continuum's all out of order, then it is completely normal. But there are ways, there are strategies to get around this, and this is exactly what I specialise in. So hopefully this video helped in some way, and if you're struggling, you know who to get in contact with because I've been through this sort of stuff before. And please do ask any questions because I'll be more than happy to share more about my experience on this and how I actually kept the weight off in the future. So that's Scott Marsh, the Mind Body Mentor, out for today, and I hope this helped in some way.